He went 94-0. Then he spent every single day of his final year making absolutely certain someone would end that streak, and he chose the hand that would do it.
There's a letter in a gym locker in Colorado. Handwritten, 3 pages, never sent. It starts, "You won't remember the day I decided to give you everything. You were 19, eating a gas station sandwich in the parking lot, chalk still on your hands. I watched you through the window and thought, there it is. That thing I lost somewhere between Title 4 and Title 7.
His name doesn't matter. Call him the record holder. 9 years at the top of a combat discipline where fractions of a second separate gold from forgotten. He'd beaten every ranked competitor on 4 continents. His technique was studied in academies across 3 countries. His highlight reel had more views than most athletes' entire careers. Untouchable, unreachable, and he was starting to realize unmoved.
What nobody tells you about being the best is how quiet it gets. The hunger that built you gone, replaced by maintenance. You train to not lose instead of training to discover. Every morning I taped my hands the same way, drilled the same combinations, and felt nothing. I was a museum exhibit of my own prime. People applauded the memory of me while I stood right there, disappearing.
He'd stopped growing. Not because he lacked discipline, he had more discipline than anyone in that building. He'd stopped because nobody could push him. His record wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a cage with a comfortable mattress. He performed for a ghost of himself, and the applause sounded like an echo bouncing off something hollow. That's when the kid walked in. 19 years old, unranked. Technically rough, dropped his guard on the inside, telegraphed his right hand, reset his feet too wide. But he moved with something the champion recognized from old footage of himself at 17. A recklessness that only exists when you have absolutely nothing to protect. Raw hunger that hasn't been contaminated by success or fear of losing what you've already won.
I sat across from you in the office that smelled like rubber mats and old sweat. You were fidgeting with a water bottle cap. I said, I'm going to teach you everything I know. You're going to break every record I have. You laughed. You thought I was testing you. I wasn't. I was trying to save the only thing left worth saving, the part of me that still wanted to be surprised.
Training started at 4:50 in the morning, before the city woke. The champion took apart his own technique, piece by piece, and handed each fragment to a kid who barely understood what he was receiving. Footwork patterns refined over a decade. Timing secrets he'd never shared with his own coaches. Counter sequences he'd kept locked in his head for championship rounds. He held nothing back, and something strange began to happen. Science calls it the protégé effect. When you teach a skill with genuine intent to create mastery, not casually, but seriously, your own understanding reconstructs itself from the ground up. Studies consistently show that people who teach retain dramatically more than those who rely on passive review alone, because explaining forces your brain to find and fill every gap. The champion wasn't giving his knowledge away. He was rebuilding his own foundation, brick by brick, from a deeper blueprint.
The kid noticed it first. You're different, he said one morning, toweling off sweat, chest heaving. You're faster than the competition tapes, way faster. The champion said nothing. But that night, he replayed his own footage from 6 months prior and saw it a crispness in his combinations he hadn't carried in 3 years. Teaching hadn't drained him. Teaching had woken something up that winning had put to sleep.
The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't winning the title. It wasn't defending it 7 times in 4 years. It was watching you improve week after week, faster than I ever did, and choosing not to hold back the last 10%. Every instinct screamed, keep something for yourself, protect your edge. That instinct, that's not wisdom, that's fear wearing a coach's jacket, and I was done wearing it.
Months ground forward. The protégé climbed the rankings, 17th, 9th, 4th. Journalists called the champion's phone with questions that tasted like vinegar. Aren't you worried he'll surpass you? You're training your own replacement. What happens to your legacy? He'd hang up, stare at the ceiling fan cutting slow circles. The honest answer was yes, he was worried. And that was exactly why he couldn't stop. His legacy was on the table now. 30 years of sacrifice. A childhood spent in gyms while other kids rode bikes. 2 reconstructed knees. A marriage that couldn't survive the obsession. Everything compressed into a number on a scoreboard. and he was actively helping someone erase that number. The cost was his entire identity. The thing he'd used to answer the question, "Who are you?" Then came the session that broke the frame. A Tuesday, nothing special about it. The protégé attempted a combination the champion had explicitly told him was too dangerous, a timing sequence that left you open for a full second, exposed with no recovery angle. The champion leaned forward from the corner, ready to correct, ready to say, "I told you not to try that." The kid landed it, clean, faster than the champion had ever executed it in competition. The mechanics weren't just correct, they were evolved. Something the champion had considered impossible at full speed, done casually on a Tuesday morning by a 20-year-old with chalk on his hoodie. The champion stood there, felt something he hadn't felt in years, surprise, then delight, pure, unguarded delight.
I wasn't wrong to teach you. I was wrong to limit what could be taught. I gave you my ceiling and called it the sky. You looked at it and said, politely, without knowing you were saying it, "That's not a sky. That's just a roof with a nice view," and you punched through it. That's when I understood what I was actually building, not a replacement, a continuation.
March, a cold arena packed loud enough to vibrate in your sternum. The protégé, now 20, stood in the center looking nothing like the fidgeting kid from a gas station parking lot. Calm, measured, carrying a decade of borrowed wisdom behind chalk-dusted hands. He broke the record, not by a fraction, by a margin that made the arena go silent before it went deafening. 9 years of history rewritten in under 3 minutes. And in the back row of the upper deck, alone, in a torn navy jacket with tape still on his hands, the champion sat, crying. Not from loss, not from pride exactly, from something rarer. The feeling of watching a wall you spent your whole life building become a floor someone else stands on. He'd spent 30 years climbing. This was the first time he'd ever lifted someone higher than he could reach.
You'll hold a record one day and feel the cage close around you. When it happens, and it will find the hungriest person in the room and give them everything. Not because you're finished, because that's how you discover you were never finished at all. So the next time you're gripping your edge so tight your knuckles ache, remember what it cost him to open his hands and what it gave him back.
The ceiling was never the ceiling. It was just the beginning. If these stories sharpen your edge, if they remind you what you're building and why, subscribe. A new story like this every evening.